Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual, Sexual, Shamanic podcast. I'm Simon, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with ISTA lead facilitator, Crystal Dawn Morris. Now, Crystal Dawn is an ISTA lead facilitator, Tantra teacher, coach, and spiritual midwife. She's been teaching Tantra for Awakening since 2007 and founded an online school, tantraversity.com, in 2018. Crystal's known for her warmth, enthusiasm, and ability to create a safe space where magic unfolds. Her events and courses support the recognition of truth in every aspect of life, from the mundane to the mystical. Embodiment of the true self reveals the field of being that is available in every moment. She lives in Sedona, Arizona, USA, where she offers coaching in person, over the phone, and via Zoom. She's passionate about helping people to wake up so that they can experience more love and freedom in their lives. Crystal Dawn, welcome to the podcast.
Yay, great. Thank you, Simon. It's great to be here. It's great to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, we've had some beautiful chats over the last few years, just setting up calls and talking about books and Tantra and different ideas. It's one of the things I love about the community, and one of the things I love about you, the fact that you're open to that, just having a chat about things.
I love that.
Actually, I will recall, I was thinking about it. I think the first time I saw you in person was wearing a Philadelphia Eagles jersey, watching.
Yes, that's right. They were
watching a football game.
Yeah, it was the first game of the season. It was the Eagles versus the Cowboys. And Javi, who's another ISTA faculty, and was one of my apprentices at one point, is a Cowboys fan. So that was actually a really a magical moment, because not too many people in the Tantra world or in the ISTA world are into the NFL. And Javi and I both love it. So there was about 5 football fans, and we were all in front of the big screen TV in the temple where other temple things were going on. And I was like, finally, all my worlds are coming together. And I have to say that was a very special moment. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, amazing. Me neither. And I love that. We might get ourselves into talking a little bit about the non-duality element of Tantra, and there's a little bit of the non-dual going on there, bringing the football into the temple space. Yeah. Hey, so there's many things I'm excited to talk to you about today, but I wonder if you could start by telling us a little bit about your journey into sacred sexuality teaching. Mm-hmm. I know that you're one of the original ISTA lead facilitators, and you're still going strong. You're still teaching all around the world. You've been living for a long time in Sedona, this place in the US where so much has gone on in the spiritual community over the last decades. So there's something that you're holding in the ISTA community that is really sort of well grounded now. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how this whole journey started for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I would say that I was been on a spiritual path all my life, even as a small child. And a lot of my sense of spirit connection came in nature, even though like I was raised Protestant and went to church, but I really felt this connection to spirit out when I was out in nature, and I spent a lot of time out in nature. And then when I was 16, I had a really powerful, like I guess we call like a samadhi awakening, where I went into a total bliss state for a week. And I just felt this incredible oneness with everything. And I just was filled with bliss continuously, basically for 7 days. And, about day 4, I was like, okay, this is my life. I'm just going to be in bliss for the rest of my life. Isn't that amazing? And then on the morning of the 8th day, I woke up and it was completely back, just normal state of consciousness. And I was like in shock, kind of like, how is it possible that I was feeling such this connection, and then suddenly that it could just sort of go poof and disappear. And I knew that it hadn't disappeared. I somehow knew that it was there, but I knew that I wasn't experiencing that same sense of oneness and that same quality of bliss. And, this is in 1971. So there wasn't a whole lot out there about these kind of things. It wasn't like you could go online and Google it. There was no internet. There was, there wasn't a whole lot at the library on this sort of subject. And I was interested I was kind of studying the Tarot and the I Ching, and I was reading, like I read Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, those kind of things. But it was almost like you had to read between the lines to try to ferret out what these things meant. And so that experience sort of kind of really launched me into the next phase of my life. And I asked Spirit, what am I supposed to do now? And I think in my imagination, it was like, go to India, become a yoga teacher. The message I got was, go find a man and have children. And I was like, find a man and have children? That's the answer. So that took me on a pretty long, 16-year detour off into I found I'm a Capricorn. I'm pretty good at making, things happen. So I met this man and we, ended up together and we had children and it was a very beautiful and powerful thing. And I'm super grateful. And I have 5 amazing grandchildren. And so all of that was amazing. And I think part of that was this recognition that at 16, you have to live life. That's part of what it is to, part of, recognizing, becoming who you think you are, is, part of the process of waking up from who you think you are. And then when I was 33, I had gone to midwifery school at 32, and I left my husband and my teenage kids behind. Just went off for a year to go to midwifery school in San Francisco, and my husband and I ended up splitting up that year. I ended up having a new lover, and while we were having, basically recreational sex, I had this amazing Kundalini awakening, just spontaneously, and then when that happened, I was like, oh, right. I remember I could feel that same feeling that I had felt at 16. And I was like, okay, I'm reconnecting with this part of myself that I kind of lost track of in the 16 years of being a wife and a mother and an entrepreneur. So and at this point, this is like in 89 or 88, I guess this is 1988. Right shortly after that, in '89, 2 books came out. The Margot Anand's book, The Art of Sex. Let's see, what is it called? The Art of Sexual Ecstasy, I think it is. And Charles and Carolyn's Muir's book came out. And so when I found those books, I was really like reading like, what is Tantra? And I knew Kundalini had something to do with Tantra. I had read something at some point and knew that much. And so that really kind of launched me on my trajectory of wanting to know more about Tantra. And also in that, as I was exploring that, and I was also becoming a midwife, that also made me realize personally that I had a lot of healing I needed to do around my own, wounding from my childhood, around sexuality, I kind of started recognizing I had issues with codependence. And so I recognized that Tantra, at least this is more like Neo-Tantra we're talking about, that, it was bringing a lot of things around sexuality. And I realized I needed to really do some healing around my own sexual wounding. And also around how to have boundaries and feel safe and, have my yeses and nos. So that got me into shamanism. So I ended up really spending the next 15 years studying shamanism and learning about Tantra on my own, sort of from books and through practices with my, lovers. But it wasn't until it was about 2002, I was doing a vision quest, a type of vision quest, where I was in the dark, basically in a very small structure in the dark for 3 days with no food or water. And then Spirit was telling me, I was very much into the Lakota path at the time, also as well as studying core shamanism in the tradition of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. But Spirit was saying, hey, this isn't your path anymore. The Lakota path is very masculine. There's too much pain and suffering. Well, you're going to go on a path. You need a new path that's going to be bliss and joy and love and freedom and celebration. And I was like, I'm thinking about all the paths I knew in shamanism. And I'm like, what are they talking about? What path is that? And then about a year later, I had a friend invite me to a weekend workshop with Sky Dancing Tantra, which was Margot Anand's work. And as soon as I went to the very first exercise, I was like, oh my God, this is my path. I need to study Tantra. And so I started studying with Margot. And it was actually, this is actually how I ended up getting involved with what has become ISTA, was when because I moved to Sedona in 2005. Again, that was kind of a spiritual thing where I was driving here to visit a friend, and Spirit told me I had to move to Sedona. I moved here. I Shortly after I moved here, Margot started a teacher's training course, which I've been waiting for like 4 years for her to have another course, and I started studying to become a Sky Dancing Tantra teacher with her. And at some point in the training, she said to me, "Oh, you're in Sedona. There's a guy there. This guy Baba Des, and he does some kind of tantric stuff. I don't know. Maybe you should go find out about what he's doing." And she also was telling me that she wanted me to speak at some kind of a sex conference. And I was like, I'm a midwife. I speak at midwife conferences. I'm not even yet a certified tantra teacher. Who's going to let me speak at a sex conference? Well, I came back from that particular week of training, and I went online to find out about Des, and I saw that he had what was then called the Dhaka Dakini Conference. And I went to that, and and it was pretty laid back, pretty loosey goosey. People just came up on the stage. He'd say, "Who wants to come up now?" In those days, it was much less structured, and I was like, "Okay, yeah, I think he would probably let me speak at one of his things." And I met him. I introduced myself to him. I met several people in the community. Two of his main teachers, the ones that actually have created the aspecting and a lot of the tools that we teach. When we talk about the 7 tools of emotional release, they were also there, River and Diamond. So I kind of got a taste of that community. And, I got to know Des a bit and, started to become friendly with him. And I was sort of curious. And then, as I began to get to know him, eventually he went on a trip around the world. Eventually he came back and he said that we're going to change the name from the Dhaka Dakini training or the Dhaka Dakini conference to the was going to be then that was the spiritual, sexual, shamanic. And then it was a practitioner's training. And which was a mouthful. And I was like, spiritual, sexual, shamanic. Okay, these are the 3 things I'm most passionate about and that have really, how spirit has really guided me in my life. All my work with midwifery involved all of that as well. The shamanic work I'd done. So I felt so connected to when just the spiritual, sexual, shamanic. I was like, I have to be part of this, and I was still kind of trying to figure out what this was. So that's really when I started becoming more involved, and at that time, Des was teaching with Triambika, and things were evolving, right? And eventually, we ended up coming up with this idea that there would be 3 facilitators. You had a lead facilitator and 2 co-facilitators, and I became a co-facilitator in 2010, and I became a lead facilitator in 2014. And of course, since then, ISTA has grown tremendously. I think one of the things that's at that time there was just a handful of us that kind of knew each other. There was just a few people that were facilitating it, and then gradually it just became, it started growing and going around the world. We've had more and more people come in. We have about 15 leads, and I'm not sure how many co-facilitators, probably like 20, 25, something like that, plus apprentices and organizers. So we've grown. This year, and in a few, like less than in 2 weeks, we're going to be having our core gathering, and it's going to be probably like 85, 90 people, maybe more than that. I'm not really totally sure on the final number, but we've grown. We're big. And part of that growing, I think, is showing both that what we bring, and people really are needing that. I think COVID really has had an impact on how, the audience that we were starting to, a different audience. We got exposed to a different audience during COVID because when people were sort of trapped at home, we did some online experiences. And so it's been interesting because I think we've been growing very quickly, and it's also it's like in the beginning, it was more people who were already doing healing work, already often already doing sexual healing work, and who were coming. And then we kind of realized, no, this is actually a fun, it's not really for practitioners, it's a foundational thing. Everybody needs it. Of course, practitioners need it too. And then we came up with our practitioner training that Triambaka created with Rafa and some other folks. So these foundational pieces is really what what we call the spiritual sexual shamanic experience is about, or sometimes referred to as the level one. And that's really the importance of having these basic tools and understanding of the nature of of the self, and having a deeper understanding of the emotional body, which is a big part of that understanding. And also like the aspect of the mind, the body, the emotions, the subtle energy, how to navigate around boundaries and all these things. These are like the primary topics that we talk about in our first training, the foundational training, and that's, I think, what we're going to talk about today is one of those tools.
Yeah, amazing. Wow. What a journey. Yeah, totally. Before we get on to the next bit, I got one lingering question. What triggered the bliss state when you were when you were 16?
Oh.
And was that, you said there was some similarities between that bliss state and the Kundalini awakening you had at the age of 33, was it?
Yeah.
Were they similar feelings? How are they similar? How are they different?
Interesting. Well, so I would say there was two things that triggered the experience at 16. One was I was taking a psychedelic, mescaline, I think. But the main thing, but of course the mescaline, that only goes for a few hours. But I was with a friend, and we both, we took it together. But we sat in front of the fire, and I had these mahogany click sticks. Now, at that time, I did not know anything about shamanism or what they call sonic driving. But in Michael Harner's Foundation for Shamanic Studies work in core shamanism, how you transform your state of consciousness is through sonic driving, which is either a drum, a rattle, click sticks. So I literally sat in front of a fire for about 8 hours with these mahogany click sticks, clicking and staring into a fire. So I would say that is, I think, what really transformed my consciousness was that I, through this, hours and hours of the sonic driving and staring into the fire, I felt one with the fire. And I could like tell it to go right or left or change colors. And that was responding to me. That was my experience. Now, I was also high on psychedelics. In the morning, when the sun came up, I went out into the world, and I was in a neighborhood. This was at my mom's house in Reseda in the San Fernando Valley, for those who know Southern California. Very, suburban kind of neighborhood. And I walked to the Reseda Park nearby. But this is a walk I'd done many times, but it was a completely different experience. Like everything I saw that I'd seen hundreds of times before, I was like, oh my God, look at this. It's amazing. I could feel this oneness with it and this incredible expansion and joy and like no separation. And then when I came back from the park, a couple hours later, went to bed. I woke up. I assumed that when I woke up, I would not be in that state anymore because, I knew I was on psychedelics, and it wasn't the first time I'd taken psychedelics. But to my shock and surprise, I was still in that state. And then I went around LA, and I started going to. First I went to beautiful places, and then I started going to uglier places because I thought, okay, it's great to feel joy when you're in a beautiful place, but like go down to the train tracks where they're dumping the garbage and there's wrecked cars. But even there, it didn't matter. It was beautiful. So that's why about day 4, I was like, okay, clearly it's not the drug. Clearly something, like I'm in some kind of a state that doesn't seem to be going away. And there was also a mantra that had come to me that I would, if I felt it was starting to slip away a little bit, I would just say this mantra. And it wasn't a mantra that I'd heard anywhere. It was just something that came to me. And so then it would come back immediately as soon as I'd start to kind of say that mantra. And but the mantra also disappeared. On day 8, the mantra was also gone. I couldn't access it. I was like, why didn't I write it down? Why didn't I record it? It wasn't like we had iPhones in those days, but we did have tape recorders. It didn't occur to me that I could possibly forget that. And how it was similar to the experience with the Kundalini awakening was that my experience in the Kundalini awakening was very much of, we were making love, and then suddenly, and I'd read something about Kundalini, probably when I was around 19 or 20, and I knew that that I felt like there was something in your base, chakra that would like activate, and it literally like it was like lightning came up from my pelvis out to the crown of my head, and I left my body, so to speak, and I literally became one with the universe, and I heard the sound of Om, and I was the sound of Om vibrating the universe into existence. So on that level, there was something about this sense of incredible expansion and incredible bliss, and this quality of vibration and some kind of a mantra, um, and that I was one with everything, and there was no separation. It was, in some ways, it was much grander in its expression, but also, and it felt like it lasted forever. Um, but eventually I came back into my body, and my lover was still inside me. So I was like, it couldn't have been forever. He would have gotten up to go get some food because that was important to him. So I knew it hadn't been forever. It probably hadn't been very long in clock time, but it felt like forever. And the shocking part was that he had no clue that anything unusual had happened. He thought it was good sex, but he didn't think, he hadn't had any kind of a Kundalini thing, which was really shocking to me as well. I was like, how could he not have noticed that I completely left my body and became one with the universe and was the sound of Om creating, existence? But this again was one of those kind of question marks, like, oh, that's curious. I need to find out, what is that about?
Yeah, this is so interesting. It's bringing up many things that I think we'll get towards talking about a little bit for me, for all of us. Let's not touch on it now, but I just want to mark this question around what to do with those experiences when we have them. I think you're speaking this way about bliss states that come through experimentation with mind-altering substances. I'm sure many people listening have had maybe a similar kind of experience. There are probably many people listening who are against that as well, not wanting to open up that kind of experience in such a dramatic way, perhaps. Or so we've probably got a range of listeners. Interested in this question of what to. So once we have this experience, what do we do with that afterwards? So let's just mark that as we get into what I'd love to get into. And you've mentioned a couple of things already, a couple of the tools that come up in the ISTA, the foundational level training, the level 1 training. You mentioned the emotional body, right? And I know you've got a really brilliant piece on, is it the emotional guidance system?
Yes.
Right? So this is one of the pieces that I know you're maybe renowned for in the ISTA field, the emotional guidance system. So I'd love to hear a little bit of that. And maybe if you can draw a link, how that leads into this really special tool of aspecting.
Sure.
Which is a key part of the ISTA training, and it's a tool that aspecting is a tool that we really encourage people to take with them beyond the training and use regularly in their lives.
Yeah. So this idea of calling it the emotional guidance system, it came to me one day. I don't know, a long time ago now, but earlier, it was after I'd started teaching ISTA. I'd been teaching probably when I became a lead, around sometime when I was early in my lead, becoming a lead facilitator. But it had something to do with I was probably driving down the road, and there, those rumble strips, right, on the side of the road in the U.S., and I think it's in most places, not everywhere. Don't have them in Costa Rica, I can tell you that. But, in places where they have lots of money for roads, they put these things called rumble strips, and that's what they're called. So that when you hit, when you kind of move out of your lane and you start to veer off the road, you'll hit these strips, and they make this obnoxious sound that, kind of gets your attention. And they're a safety feature, right? So one day as I was driving along and I was noticing that, and I was feeling like our emotional guidance system, in a sense, is like our internal, GPS. So everyone nowadays, because of our smartphones, we're used to using the GPS. Um, and the GPS helps us to get from here to there, safely and easily and effortlessly through our, on a journey. So our life is like that. Our life is a journey, and I feel like the emotional guidance system is part of our system to help guide us to be in our natural flow and to be aligned with. And as I mentioned, in the description you read about me, is that my passion is around helping people to awaken to their true self, so they can live from a place of ease and flow, and that part of that guidance system, when you start to recognize, is your emotional guidance system. It's not the only one, but it is an important piece. And it's one that most people are very familiar with. Now, one challenge in our Western world is that we tend to be more mind, we like possibly from the Greeks. I think we can blame it on the Greeks, but the Greeks put rationality over emotion, right? So they sort of separated the mind being the rational part and the emotion being more the feminine, feminine, like mind was more masculine and rational, and emotions were more feminine, and so they were kind of given less importance. And you don't see that in the tantric tradition. Mind and emotions are considered not separate, right? They're totally connected, which is interesting. So the emotional guidance system is there, and when we hit the rumble strips, so the rumble strips are whatever, they're not going to be the same for each person. There different things create triggers for different people and different emotional qualities. Like oftentimes people think, when you hit the rumble strip, so we could say another thing, we might say these are our challenging emotions, or the emotions arise when we feel challenged, is another way of saying that. Um, so those rumble strips are getting our attention, and basically how I experience that is like they're letting me know that I'm not in my ease and flow of my true nature, where I'm totally aligned with my higher self, and I feel this ease and flow in my life. I was having a day like that today, where I was like bumping into things, and I'm like, what's going on with me? And I was like, my computer wasn't working, I couldn't get my passwords, like those kind of days that bring up like, what's going on? um so I took a walk and meditated while I was on my walk, and I came back feeling much better before doing this with you, so that was great. So it's good to notice, like when those challenges come up, that's a sign that we've hit the rumble strips. So somehow we're not in alignment with that ease and flow, which I would say is our natural state. When I say the true self is our true nature, which is the natural state, which is to be in our ease and in our flow. And it doesn't mean that we want to avoid things that are challenging, because those things also help us to grow and evolve and develop and expand and learn more compassion and have new experiences. They help us to understand other people. Um, so it's not that we want to always, like we're all going to be in ease and flow and avoid everything else, but it's like learning how to be in new experiences and still have a sense of I can relax and be in my ease, because I have this connection to this higher, or I don't even know if I want to say higher, but this essence nature that's always already here, that has a natural wisdom to it, that knows what ease and flow is, because that's the state of our natural being. And that sometimes in the Sanskrit that would be called the Satchitananda, right? The conscious bliss of this moment. Um, so so when we hit those rumble strips, that's a moment to first pay attention, like, oh, I'm hitting up against something that needs my attention. And then it's an opportunity to do a little self inquiry. What's going on with me right now? Which I did earlier today. I'm like, what's happening? I don't know. I'm feeling out of sorts. I'm not sure. And you don't have to. The tendency in the West, especially in psychology, is often that we go into psychologizing ourselves or finding a reason, but there's not always like a reason. So I was just like, something's out of sorts. I haven't been out on a walk because been having snow and kind of cold weather. And so I was like, I just need to go out on a walk. I need to be out in nature. And I walked for 30 minutes, came back. I felt much better, get my energy moving, feel my body, feel my breath, meditate, connect with source, and come back feeling much better. So this emotional guidance system is there to support, to wake, sort of get our attention. Like when the emotions get triggered, this is an opportunity to notice, like, what's up right now. And when I say the challenging emotions, it's not even necessarily, like I said, it's not necessarily that the emotions are challenging, but whatever's challenging us is bringing up emotions. And those emotions vary for some people. In my family of origin, anger was like not allowed, like to the point that it was non-existent. Like I had to go through 2 years of therapy before I could even acknowledge that I had any kind of anger. I identified anger as anxiety because my family was so, my mother's parents were both alcoholics, and so she had just been raised us as like, we're not going there. Joy was great, sadness, you could be sad, but anger was not allowed. Now another family, like depending on your culture, if you're from a Southern Italian family or from so depending on the culture, anger might be like everybody's like yelling and being really intense, and that's like normal. But maybe being really quiet and sad and introspective, they might be like, what's wrong with you? What's happening? So it's not always the same in every family. And that's important to recognize. And so whatever's the challenges, the emotions that come up when you feel challenged vary depending on your family of origin, your culture, your age, your experience, all of those things. But it's important to start to recognize when that happens. And because we live in a not very emotionally I would say that our culture in the United States and most Western culture is not that friendly to emotional aptitude, right? Like it's like go to your mind, figure it out, move through it, get on with it. Figure out what's going on, and get past it. Often we've been taught just push it down, ignore it. That's probably the most common. Or go in your room, go take a time out, have throw some pillows, have a shout, and then come back feeling good. So part of that too is like recognizing I do have emotions and they do need to move, and the word emotion is like energy in motion, and we do need to give them a space to move. And in the ISTA SSSEX, we talk about these tools. We give you several different tools around how to move the emotional energy. Sound, breath, and movement we talk about in Tantra. And then we have this tool we call aspecting. Now, the term aspecting, there are other, sometimes it's called voice dialogue or parts work. I learned it like 5 years before I got introduced to the ISTA trainings. From Margot and on, we learned that in Skydancing Tantra, it was one of our main tools for dealing with the emotional body. And my understanding is that comes from Fritz Perl's work of the Gestalt therapy. But I'm going to contextualize it in a way that really makes the most sense to me at this point in my life, which is looking at it from a non-dual tantric perspective, which is the recognition that we are the creators of our own experience. And so when we do this aspecting work, it's like we take a moment where we're sitting, you could have 2 chairs or 2 pillows, and you first come into the sense of like, oh, I'm feeling really triggered right now. I have a story that something's wrong in my relationship, and this person is not telling me the truth about what's going on with them. So I can sit down and I can express from my perspective and imagine the other person on a pillow and tell them my thoughts, my fears, my concerns, what's coming up for me. And I'm afraid that something's going on that's going to create separation. Maybe I'm afraid there's an affair, or maybe I'm afraid that he's, having some health issue, whatever my projections are. But then the beautiful piece about aspecting is because we can do that in our minds, but it's different first of all, it's different when you speak it out loud. And that's an important piece of aspecting, is that you go inside, you feel the feelings, and then you speak it out loud. So even hearing your own internal thoughts in your own ears when you speak it, sometimes just that is a revelation. Because often our deepest fears, we're so afraid to say them that we won't speak them. And then if you actually speak it out loud, sometimes once you hear it back, you're like, oh, I can handle that. That's not so bad. Or, yeah, that sounds really crazy, but that's really how it feels. So it really helps us, again, have more insight and compassion too, compassion for ourselves. But then the other piece is you move to the other pillow or the other chair and you drop in, and this is kind of the shamanic aspect of it, is that you like drop into that other person's experience. Now, from a non-dual, so when I first started teaching this, I was teaching it more from a shamanic perspective, but in non-dual tantra has the shamanic aspect woven into it as well. So from that either shamanic or non-dual perspective, when you go to that other side, you shapeshift, right? Into, like, from the shamanic, you'd say we shapeshift into the other person. So now I become the person I'm triggered by.
So just to set things up and just to make sure people are following, this is a kind of exercise that takes place that you might that we facilitate in the ISTA training, but you've also facilitated in other ways prior to joining ISTA. And so you'd invite people to work. They're not working with another person in the space; they're just with themselves. So they go and so they might be sitting on a cushion, facing another cushion, right? But it's an empty. There's nothing. There's no one sitting on that other cushion. And as you've been explaining, they feel their own feelings, what's going on for them right now, and they maybe start to speak them.
Yeah.
And then towards this other cushion, perhaps. And then you're describing this kind of shamanic shift that occurs in the next phase of the exercise.
Yeah, so and you can also do this on your own at home, which is again what you were mentioning, that we encourage people who've done the ISTA training. But for those people out there who are listening to this podcast who maybe haven't done an ISTA training yet, you can do this on your own, and I'm sure there's plenty of information out there on, if you Googled it, that explain it more specifically. But the point is that you recognize you have that charge. Your emotional guidance system is triggered. You're feeling a challenge. You're feeling emotions, and then you're saying, "Oh, I want to clear this. I want to take the time to clear this." Now, in an ISTA training, we're doing this as a group process that's guided. But at home, you could just sit down on the ground, 2 pillows or 2 chairs. You don't have to be on pillows if you don't like it. And then you're going first inward and giving yourself an opportunity to really feel what you're feeling and express it out loud, verbally, out loud. It's really important that you speak it out loud, that it's not just in your head. It makes a huge difference. A lot of times people don't realize that, but that's really important. So you speak until at some point you sort of feel like, all right, I've said everything I need to say in this moment. And then there's like a pause. And sometimes you might need to shake your body or scream into your hands to move some energy as well. And then at some point, when you feel sort of complete with what you're experiencing, you move to the other side, to the other pillow or the other chair. And then that's when you kind of call in the embodiment of this other person, in this example that I'm giving. So in this case, a partner that I'm having some issue with. And then I feel I become that person. I feel into their body. It's not what I, Crystal Dawn, think that person would say to me about that. It's really me letting go of all my stories about them and really trying to become them and feel into their experience, their emotional experience. And notice what I feel, and notice that they've also heard what I've just said, right? So now I get to be on the other, it's like you get to be the other shoe on the other foot, so to speak. So I get to feel like, oh, how was it to hear everything that Crystal Dawn just said to this person? And how did that feel? And what did that bring up for them? And then you start to feel, and it's amazing. It's a really magical experience because suddenly you'll hear yourself speaking. And things will come out of the other person's mouth that you couldn't often never even imagine they would ever say to you. Like you might have had this whole story, like I may have had a whole story that, something's going on with his health or something's going on at work or something's going on with somebody he has an attraction to and that he's holding out on me. And actually it might be something completely different. He's had a conversation with his father and found out that his father's, breaking up with his, or his father's having a health issue, or his, something's going on and he hasn't, and it's bringing up fear in him, and he's just trying to deal with his own emotions. It has nothing to do with me whatsoever or our relationship, but he's dealing with something that's really deeply impacting his emotional body, and he's not feeling safe to communicate about it because maybe he is not even clear in his own self about what he's feeling. So as I start to, hear his experience, feel his experience in my body, hear his experience through my words, and this doesn't necessarily mean that I have to go interrogate him after this. I'm not going to go, but it's just whatever information comes, you trust it. You let it be as it is. You listen, you feel, you hear, you see, your experience. At some point, that feels complete, and then you go back to the other side and you take in what you just heard, that this other aspect of yourself spoke to you about their experience, and you're like, oh my God, now I get it, that you're really struggling with this thing that's going on and you're not clear about how to express it, and you're just trying to take care of yourself while you get clarity, and that my pressuring you to tell me what's going on is not helping to support you. So it doesn't so matter so much if the facts are correct, but it's more that you're getting the sense of the energetics and how the energy is flowing, and how where my fears are impacting them and where their fears are impacting me. So it creates more of the sense of compassion, of a willingness to lean in and have a deeper quality of listening, to let go of sometimes the egoic demands of either whether it's attachments or aversions, um, and where we are like in a story that they have to give us what we need immediately. It's like, oh, okay, he's in a process. Maybe what I need to do is like trust his process and give him the space, and let go of my fears and go get some support from somebody else if I'm needing support, instead of trying to get it from him. And so when you start to do this, the really amazing thing about this practice, and I've seen this happen many, many times, is I've had, people in ISTA trainings who have had past, lovers or parents or children, who they have had some kind of serious breakdowns where there had been no communication, and they'll do one aspecting session, and within like 24 hours, they'll get an email or a call from that person saying, I'm really ready to like resolve this issue, or I feel like I really want to get back in touch with you, or I'm so sorry that this happened. I really want to repair our relationship. And so this is again where the non-dual piece comes in, is that when we recognize from the non-dual perspective, if I'm the creator of my reality, and if there's only the one, which is what non-dual means, that there's just the one awareness showing up as all the different forms, then if I do this relationship repair with myself, and in relationship to how I'm experiencing the other person, that can actually heal not only my own experience of it, but it can actually shift the reality that's going on, not only with myself, but with the other person or other people involved. And it's such powerful, magical work. And again, you can't be attached to that. You can't be attached to the outcome. You have to just be open and be in the process. So it's not like, I'm going to do this because I really want to make them change. No, that doesn't work. But it has an authentic power. And mainly it's because you're willing to shift. You're willing to transform your relationship to how you're seeing the situation, how you're seeing them, how you're seeing yourself. How you're like letting go of your expectations, and it's in your willingness to be open and relaxed and come back to love within yourself, come into a deeper relationship with, you're trusting your flow and you're trusting their flow and you're trusting the flow of life, that magic has a space where it can move. And in the ISTA training, which is like the way I learned it, was just the aspecting itself. But in the ISTA, we also bring in some of these other emotional release tools. But really, I think one of the pieces that I'm because I've also been doing some research recently around sort of the new information we have about the neurology and and how our central nervous system responds to trauma and these kinds of things. So I think one of the things that I'm starting to recognize is that it's really important for people to use these tools in a way that works for them. And it doesn't, partly I think it's more of an American thing, maybe. I don't know if it's true in all of, the Western culture, but in the US, everything is like bigger, better, harder, faster, stronger, it's like, and that's not really true. And especially when we're dealing with trauma, or where we're really dealing with things, very early childhood wounding, in any kind of trauma response, we need to be mindful that it's important to do it gently and not always try to make everything so intense. And even when we're working with the emotional body, it's not that we have to scream and loud, yell and pound pillows. It's more like what we need to do. What do we need to do? Even very subtle movement of the body, and using your breath and making some sound that can be very real, gentle, is equally as powerful, and in some cases more powerful than trying to do a lot of intensity. So one of the things I was talking to a friend yesterday is this importance of learning how to. It's the ease of going between these states, like this emotional guidance system. It's like, okay, I hit the rumble strips. I recognize something's moving. I do a process, or I just move my energy. I come back into ease. Oh, I hit the rumble strips again. It's like learning how to do that without it being so scary. For those of us who've been trained that our emotions are dangerous, which is actually probably a lot of people, there's a huge fear to even let your emotions out. I mentioned earlier that I had done 2 years of body-centered somatic therapy before I could acknowledge that I had anger. Yeah, you'd think I could have gotten to it before 2 years, but no. And the first time I let myself feel my anger, I was living in San Francisco, and my experience internally, as I really touched into feeling it for the first time probably in my life, at this time it was probably like 30, 34, 35. It felt like an atomic bomb. I literally saw an atomic bomb mushroom cloud over San Francisco. I was like, oh my God, I've destroyed San Francisco. I wasn't doing anything. I was laying there on the floor in my therapist's office, breathing, but I was feeling this intensity that felt so strong. And when I left her office, I remember it was kind of funny. And so the mind is so weird because, of course, I was in her office in San Francisco. The office was intact. But I remember when I opened the door, I thought, what if I go out there and everyone's dead? I had that I literally had that thought in my mind. I remember I went out, I looked at it. It was a beautiful summer day. And I was like, the birds are singing, people are walking, things are laughing, the sun is shining, it's beautiful. Oh, nobody in San Francisco has a clue that I felt this intense anger. And it was for the first time in my life, I think I felt safe that, okay, it's okay to feel angry. It's okay to express my anger, and it's not going to create harm, because I had been raised with such some kind of overriding fear that was never spoken, but it was obviously really deeply communicated to me and my nervous system. And my brother also has the same experience, that I was completely terrified to even feel my anger. And so that's why these tools are so helpful. And learning how to work with our emotional guidance system is so important. And this tool of aspecting is a really powerful tool. And it's a way to begin to have deeper communications and feel our emotions, express our emotions, and get into a deeper relationship. I mean, you can just aspect with the different parts of yourself as well. You can aspect with the part of yourself that's afraid to feel your feelings. And you can, one pillow could be your mind talking to your feelings. The other pillow could be your feelings talking to your mind. If you're somebody who's super hyper rational, that might be a very helpful practice.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Wow. Wow. What a download. There's so much there. And for people who are familiar with parts work or Gestalt, or know the aspecting practice already and are maybe confused about the emotional expression side of it that you're talking about. One of the ways that we can do that practice of aspecting is, or one of the parts of it is to kind of somatically experience it as well. So maybe you move energy through your body as you're aspecting, right? So it's not just sitting there. It can be, but one of the things you can add to that practice is some somatic sort of engagement, moving your body, making sounds, breathing. It doesn't just have to be just talking.
Yeah, it's the breath, sound, movement, shaking of the body, hand screaming. I mean, sometimes we do pound pillows, but it's important that you know how to do that correctly so you don't hurt yourself. So I wouldn't recommend that unless you've been trained. But also just sometimes just
Yeah.
stand up and shaking the body is
Mm.
really helpful. So it's important to move the energy. And so, and also,
Mm.
if you start to get too much in your head, that's a good time. If you start to notice that you're just thinking and you're spiraling, that's a good time to stop talking, stand up, shake your body, and maybe do a hand scream or like stomp on the ground and put your hands up. We call that power stomping.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Power stomping.
something that will move the energy, and then
Yeah.
come back into to like dropping back into the stillness for a moment and reassessing. Um, I
Mm.
think one of the challenges that I talk about in the emotional guidance system is that I feel like traditional talk therapy, I'm not talking like somatic therapy, but traditional talk therapy is often when you get down on the ground and you explore the rumble strips. Like it's like investigating the rumble strips instead of investigating how to get out of the rumble strips. So a lot
Mm.
of us have been trained, and this is sort of what the mind wants to do. The mind wants to get down there and say, well, why am I feeling this, and how come this, and look at this. Every time I hit this spot, and it looks like this, I get really upset, and you won't change. But that's not going to really solve the problem. That we know that we've been doing that, we're doing that, we're doing that. It's the same story. You have to stop getting down and trying to investigate the rumble strips. And it's recognized the rumble strips are there, the emotions are there, the challenge is there to help you wake up from the story that's no longer supporting your reality. The conditioning that we got from our parents and from our culture and from our families and from our relationships, when we're in the rumble strips, that's a sign that that story is no longer supporting your deeper truth. And that's when you say, oh, I just need to move that energy, get out of that old conditioning, come back into ease and say, what is the deeper truth here now?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
beautiful.
that's actually
Amazing.
super helpful with that to get more clarity. And sometimes you need support, especially if it's really core wound stuff, deep childhood stuff, if you've had some serious trauma, if you have PTSD or something like that, like you may not be able to move through that territory on your own. You may need to get somebody who's familiar with this work who can coach you, who's a trauma therapist. You may need one-on-one work. One of the things that you had mentioned in one of the questions you said you might ask me about was having to do with what's changed over time with ISTA. And I would say one of the things that I feel has really changed in the last few years is, there's more awareness around trauma. And then I think a lot of people, because of COVID, there's been trauma from the COVID experience and from being not able to travel and feeling trapped, and having your whole life turned upside down. Um, and so and also there's just so much continuous influx of information. I think people are in a lot of information overload from all like social media and just all of the news and politics and global, like the 24/7 access to global news, um, and all of these things. Like, this is not really how humans nervous systems are designed. We're designed to know what's going on in our immediate environment. We're not designed, our emotional our central nervous system literally is not designed to deal with all of the traumas that are going around the whole planet 24/7. And now people have access to especially if they're addicted to that stuff. If you're addicted to Facebook, if you're addicted to CNN, if you're addicted to MSNBC, your nervous system cannot handle that. So that alone, just taking on all that information, can create a quality of overwhelm, and that has a traumatic aspect to it. So I feel like part of what's happening in the world, and what I'm seeing more in when people are coming into ISTA trainings, is that I think there is more of that, like, just their nervous system is really overactivated, right? There's just too much adrenaline, too many corticosteroids flowing through their nervous system, um, and that it's not healthy. So one of the aspects about non-dual tantra is this like learning to how to let go of what everything looks like. If you know it's all awareness, you can sort of relax for a moment and say, okay, it's all awareness, it's having an experience, but what's the essence of that awareness? Can I come back into the center? And this is when we're in that ease and flow space. We're in a spacious, quiet inner landscape, so to speak, or inner spaciousness where everything is calm and quiet. It's like we call it the ground of being, or I like to call it the ground of being. Um, and then there's a quality in that ground that's very supportive, very quiet, and very nurturing. And it's like there's a wholeness there. So we come back to that wholeness, and that fills our cup back up. I mean, I think for those of us who do this kind of work on a regular basis, we absolutely have to know how to come back into that quiet core of our being and fill our own cup with that sense of like life force energy without a story. Otherwise, we can't keep doing this work. We end up burnout. And that's a very important thing, I think, for every person to learn, like how to come back into your own place of centeredness, and how do you get out of all of the overstimulation of information.
Yeah, it resonates. Definitely resonates. So, if we can find a way, I'd love for us to touch on one of the creations that you've led recently, relatively recently, within ISTA, which is a standalone retreat / training called the Living Level 1, right?
Yeah.
So ISTA has the Level 1 training, which is the foundational course. That's the one that the majority of people will do. Then there's a Level 2, and you can't do the Level 2 unless you've done the Level 1, because there's all these practices and vocabulary that you need to understand in order to be able to go do the Level 2. And there's a Level 3, much if you're really sort of passionate and you really want to follow through the teaching. We've got the practitioner training for people that are really working in the field with taking on clients and holding point for communities around this work. And then we've got this living level 1. Could you tell us a little bit about the living level 1?
Yeah,
why does it exist? Why would we go?
Yeah, so the living level 1, so the living level 1 came from me. It was an inspiration. Actually, Lori Handlers, another ISTA lead, had come up with this idea of having basically having a level 1 SSSEX for repeaters only. So her idea was we'll just have a level 1 training, the spiritual, sexual, shamanic experience training with only people who've already taken it at least once, and maybe more than once, so that you'd be in a container with people who already knew all the level 1 tools. So she had created that idea right around the time COVID hit. So she had twice had it planned. It was going to be in, I believe, in Honduras, and then it got canceled both times. So then another ISTA organizer reached out to me a year or so ago and said, "Hey, Crystal Dawn, I want to do this thing in Northern California. What do you think?" So I was like, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." And I had a conversation with Lori and checked in with her how she felt about that. And then as I sat with it, I really thought about rather than, because I know a lot about human psychology, and the thing is, if you have people who come who've already done something, they kind of think they know it, and if they come and do it again, even though it'd be great to do it in a group with a bunch of people who've already done it, my feeling was that it wouldn't have quite the same impact as if you create a new curriculum. And one of my superpowers is curriculum development. So I was like, hey, I'm going to create a whole new curriculum that is going to be all about integrating the level 1 more deeply and giving people more preparation for the level 2. because my feeling is level one, and there's a big leap between what you learn in level one and what you experience in level two. And if you don't come with a strong background in shamanism and in personal growth work, for some people that leap from level one to level two can be a bit much for the nervous system, and sometimes it's like it takes a lot for them to integrate the level two and to really be fully able to experience it in a way that feels good. So I thought, oh, I could create this living level one to help people integrate what they got in their the SSSEX, to support them to taking that in more deeply into the nervous system and really knowing how to go from it's like when I think of integration, it's like how to move from the doing of something, which is more like body and mind trying. There's always this trying aspect and efforting aspect, versus when it's really integrated into your nervous system and into your way of being in the world, then you can just relax and I'm just being this. Then I know when I get triggered, I know how to use the tools. When I need an aspect, I know how to sit on the pillow and do the work. It's integrated into my life. So I ended up creating a week-long training called Living Level One. That's what we're calling it now. That might change. With the intention of helping people to really support a deeper integration. And one of the things that I've been hearing from people the last few years is they want more support of how to integrate these tools in their life. So there was more integration focused. There's a whole piece. We spent a whole day learning about navigating non-ordinary reality, like through in different ways of shamanic journey work, which is very supportive because level two is a lot about this non-ordinary reality, and it's like very much shamanic in its transpersonal in its focus. So for people who don't have a background in shamanism, that's super helpful to have a better understanding of just like what is shamanism, how do you move into non-ordinary reality, how do you come back from that, what do you do, as you mentioned earlier, what do you do with those experiences that you had when something wild and crazy happened in your journey, and now you're like, well, what does that mean and how am I supposed to take that into my life? So we give people those kind of skills and tools and help contextualize ways of working with that. We also spend a whole day doing a lot more work around shadow work, which is what a word Carl Jung developed, the shadow, which is basically the parts of ourselves that we don't tend to recognize and that we tend to project on others. So typically our shadows are the things we see in others that either we really don't like or that we wish we could be, because there was both the light shadow or the bright shadow and the dark shadow. So we spend a day working on shadow. We also spend some time focusing on our relationship to pleasure. In the SSACX, it's more about looking at where are our core wounds and what are the emotions we haven't dealt with, and where are the places of shame, guilt, and fear in our bodies that we need to heal and transform. So now it's like, okay, we were learning how to have a deeper relationship with pleasure. Like, what is our relationship to pleasure? And also, another question you had mentioned, let's go back to, was about the peak experiences versus being. So typically we have these, like when I'm talking about this experience I had at 16, peak experience, week of ecstasy. The Kundalini awakening, peak experience. Didn't last for maybe huge amounts of time, but unforgettable, never, like life-changing. And right now, medicine work, a lot of people are really into doing plant spirit medicine. And again, they have these peak experiences. And sometimes, and I'll just be honest with you that I spent probably a good 20 years of my spiritual journey thinking that peak experiences were what it meant to be awake. And let me tell you, that is not what it means to be awake. Peak experiences, when they come, welcome them, appreciate them. There's a lot of richness there, but it's not, you can't sustain peak experiences, and it's not what it means to be awake. You take a peak experience and you don't want to be chasing after them. That's not helpful either. That just leads to more addiction and more, and then you're on the addiction, a peak experience treadmill. And that's not what it's about. It's like learning, when you have a peak experience, take it, feel blessed, feel honored, appreciate it. It often takes a long time to digest peak experiences when they come. And, but we want to learn how to integrate them, because the beauty of this sort of non-dual tradition is the recognition that it's God, the divine awareness, spirit is always already right here, right now, in this very moment. No matter what it looks like, whether it's me speaking to you on this call, or whether it's me pulling weeds in my backyard, or playing with my 9.5-year-old granddaughter who was here last week for a week, or whether it's having the most amazing lovemaking session, of your life. But it's not about getting caught up in what it looks like. It's recognizing that it's always already here. Like, how do we find that sense of joy that's not like a big, oh my God. It's more like, yes, it's just this, like, when I'm in my real ease, when I'm in my flow, there's a quality of joy that doesn't have to be like a big deal, but it's just like, yes, this moment, those really sweet moments that you can, and it's very nourishing to the nervous system. It's not, causing the nervous system to feel like, like overwhelmed. Um, but there's a sweetness in it. So part of what we're really doing is learning how to integrate the moments that are challenging with the moments, those peak experiences with the mundane moments, and how do we feel the sweetness in the mundane. How do we, it's really a process of Adi Shanti likes to say, of letting everything be as it is. When I first moved to Sedona, I was, I was like, I was taking a year off. I decided to take a year off. I was 50, and I thought, I'm going to really meditate. I'm going to really get good at meditating, because I'd been learning. I learned to meditate at 12, and I was 50, and I was like, I've never really liked meditating, but I'm going to get good at it. I've got to figure this out. And I got, Adi Shanti has a book called True Meditation by Sounds True. And I got that book, and I opened it up. It's a very thin little book, like, maybe 30 pages. And I read somewhere in there, it says meditation is simply learning to let everything be as it is. And it was like a revelation to me, because I was like, oh, well, I can do that. How come nobody ever told me that? I thought meditation means you have to, like, get everything out of your mind and be completely quiet and be completely still and have some kind of cosmic thing happen while you're not thinking and you're not doing. And I always found that incredibly difficult and painful. But to simply sit and let everything be as it is, there was a freedom in that. And there's something about that quality of just letting it be there without, it's not believing all the thoughts. It's not, it is there is a different relationship to the mind. Thoughts come, thoughts go, but you're not following them in the same way. So there's just this learning. It's really a being. There's this being of, like, let everything be as it is. Like today, when I was having this kind of challenging day, I was like, okay, well, this is what it is today. Can I just let that be okay? Because I was starting to go into a story of, like, why is something going on? It was, what are my transits today? Are the planets misaligned? Is something happening? Is somebody out there casting spells on, like, the mind will go crazy with stories. But I was just like, yeah, you just have one of those days. Take a walk, do some breathing, meditate, come back into your ease. Maybe when you get on this call with Simon, it'll shift your energy. I think it has. I feel great right now. So it's learning how to let everything be as it is. And that's part of, again, this aspecting tool. It's learning how to let your emotions be as they are, let the story come out, listen to the other perspective, let that experience come through, find a way to bring that into some kind of resolution, use it as a way to move your energy and gain more awareness. And then you can just, like, I can just let everything be as it is, including myself. Because oftentimes we get to a place where we think we're really spiritual because we're letting everybody else be as they are, or we're letting the world be as it is. But oftentimes in our own minds, we're still being our own worst critic, or we're still beating ourselves up. And that's really and this is ultimately the only place where waking up happens, that awareness happens, that consciousness happens, is right here, right in this place, And we tend to, in our culture, focus all the attention out there. If I just have the right lever, if I just have the right, if I get my body into the right kind of shape, if I get the new car, or if I can get that house in Costa Rica, or if I can find my ISTA community, or if we have all these stories about what we need to get so we can finally be happy and be in our ease, when really it's always about just come back to the breath, come back to this moment. Just, like it's so simple. And my experience of that is that when I just close my eyes and simply drop within, there is this joy that's just right here, that's like always available. If I stop long enough and I'm willing to turn the attention inward, then I can reconnect to that, which is, it's always already here. And it's just a matter of, am I willing to let everything be as it is and slow down and come into a place of that awareness that is connected to source, that is the ground of being, that has that quality of that ananda. And I think that's what pretty much everybody's looking for. And people are working so hard right now. I feel like the world, everyone's working so hard to try to find that. And if there's one thing I would like people to take away from this podcast, it's like, hey, you can just relax, take a breath, sit down, take a few moments, look inside, and find that ground of peace, of joy, of simply being, and just take a moment and rest in that. And that if you can do that a few times a day, even if you do it like 10 seconds, 12 times a day, that's 2 minutes of meditating. And it will change that even just that alone, in my experience, will radically shift your life.
That's so beautiful. It reminds me, I've been reading some of your material on facilitating, and I know we'll have some facilitators and coaches and things listening to this, and people who run groups of all kinds. And something that you make sure to include in a lot of the exercises is stillness. So maybe you do some practices with someone or by yourself or whatever it is, and you go through the doing aspect of that process or that exercise, and then you make sure that what is built into often the end of a cycle within an exercise is a period of stillness. And the stillness is about awareness. Okay, I'm just going to allow those shifts to settle down, and I'm just going to bring myself back to the middle of that lane and just feel that awareness filling in. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's the important, there's an important piece there in that we live in a culture that's so doing based and so busy, and I feel like in my lifetime that has just become so endemic that people don't even really know what to do with themselves when there's like nothing, like if they don't have a device. And it's just amazing, like, what do you do? There's, you don't have a device, and people are lost, like, and they're just so used to constant interaction. It's like, can you just be present and just be with yourself for a moment, just be in the stillness of the moment, and or just looking somebody's eyes and not speaking, and just breathing together. That is so powerful. Like, probably all of the millions of dollars that people spend every year on therapy, on couples therapy, you could probably save a lot of money if people would just sit and look in each other's eyes and breathe together for 5 or 10 minutes a day. That's probably worth 2 hours of therapy.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so much gold here, Crystal Dawn. I mean, we've opened up so much, we've filled in so much, and there's so much more to talk about. But maybe we'd have to leave it for another time.
Well, I've got a lifetime of stuff to share. I'm happy to do another call another time, Simon. It's been super great to see you and be with you. And I'm so I just want to really acknowledge you and Ria and Caitlin and those who are really creating these podcasts and doing the work.
Usha as well as hosting podcasts,
social media and different, all the things, because I feel like people need to hear these things. It opens doors, and it gives people a new reference point. And there's magic in that. And sometimes when if people are going to be out there surfing the net and on Instagram and doing all this stuff, so Spotify, I'm glad to know that there's places where they can go and get kernels of information that can hopefully guide them to having more ease and love and freedom and flow and abundance on a daily
Yeah, amazing.
basis.
Well, thanks. Yeah, well, thanks so much for saying that. Yeah, we're trying not to clog the airways or the digital lines with more stuff just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Um, but there's definitely something in line with what we're trying to do, what we're all trying to do in ISTA, but particularly those of us who are making stuff outside of the retreats and trainings for people to engage with. There's definitely something that we're trying to do that's in line with what you're doing with the living level 1, which is trying to find ways to extend the culture beyond the retreat. I think my experience, and I think so many other people's experience, was to go to an ISTA training or retreat and be like, oh, I want my life to be like this. I don't want this to end. I want to keep cultivating this. I want to be with the kinds of people that I've met here. I want my community to be speaking like this and interacting with each other like this. So I think one of the things we're all trying to do, and maybe part of what this conversation has been about, is like what are the things that we can do to extend that into our everyday lives.
Yeah. So anyone out there who's heard this, who's an ISTA level 1 grad, we'd love to have you at a living level 1, and there's going to be a couple this year. We're doing one in like a month or so in April, and then another one in November, and there'll be others around the world over the next few years. And I think again, it's like when you come to an ISTA, I would say from many people, when they come to the SSSCX, especially the first one, it often has that peak experience quality, and that's that part of like, I just want more of this. It's so amazing. But then there's also that piece of it. They go home, and then sometimes they have the thing where they're sort of like get back into life, and they feel that sense of kind of disconnection. And so if I think this piece about the living level 1 is to come and like deepen and integrate that more fully into your nervous system so that so you can start to develop those tools, and also to help you develop some kind of community where you are. Because that's another piece we add in the living level 1 is how to create, even if it's just a few friends that you can get together with once or twice, a month, and have, do some, just being present with each other, speaking from your heart, sharing what's going on for you. So I think community is a part of that as well. And I think that's another piece of like that's been being challenged now, because people are so, moving, and, everyone's everywhere and traveling constantly and on their devices. And one of the things I feel like, because I travel a lot for my work, and one of the beautiful things that used to be true about traveling when I was, prior to the internet, was you would talk to people, when you were in a train station or an airport or on a bus, you would have conversations with other travelers, when you were on a plane, you would talk with people in the airport, you would talk to people on the plane, and you would have these really beautiful experiences with people, and you start to, we had a different kind of culture around getting to know one another, which I feel like now everyone's got their device in front of their face, and so we're losing like our access to community, because I feel like these devices take over our lives. And so it's part of it is learning, how do we create that sense of community? How do we hold spaces where community can thrive? And how do we get people off the devices and into like real interpersonal communication and in-person communication? I know I'm a little, I'm 68. I just turned 68 in January, and I know I'm like, maybe I'm getting to be an old person, but for me, it's like I still really like. That's why I like teaching ISTA events, because I like being in person with people. I like looking in someone's eyes, as lovely as it is to look at your eyes here. It's not the same as if I could see them in person, right? So there's something about that too. I feel like one of the things, like you're saying, people out there want to create events for other ISTA community. It's like we need to have spaces where we can be with people who share our culture, share these tools, who can support one another, and also to like actually, be able to give them a hug and sit in the room and look in their eyes and share food. This is something I feel like that's we need to keep cultivating, and that it's an important part
Mm.
of what the humans need. We need to feel connected physically with people, not just on social media. Facebook is not like a cuddle puddle.
No, it's not. That's true. And if people have never experienced a cuddle puddle, it's a wondrous thing.
Yeah.
Before we go, Crystal Dawn, are you up for some quick fire questions?
Sure, fire away.
In just a few words, 3, 5, or less.
Okay.
If you were a piece of furniture, what would you be?
A chaise lounge.
What did you have for dinner last night?
What did I have for dinner last night? I had camarones rancheras.
Oh, what is that?
That's shrimp in a ranchero sauce. It's Mexican food.
Amazing. If you could swap lives with someone, who would you swap lives with?
Albert Einstein.
Is there one thing that must go on retreat with you?
One thing. My pillow. My pillow and my zafu. I need two things. My pillow and my zafu.
Sorry to ask. What's a zafu?
The zafu is like a meditation cushion.
What is the last thing you did for the first time?
The last thing I did for the first time, I hiked 9 miles in Costa Rica to a beautiful, like 150-foot waterfall with some friends, and that was very special.
Wow, it sounds gorgeous.
It was.
Crystal Dawn, thank you so much for spending this time with us tonight. It's been a joy, as it usually is, to talk to you, and I can't wait for the next time.
Yeah, well, I'll see you in Mexico in a couple weeks.
See you in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, bye-bye. Take care.
Much love. Ciao.